In the past, Shaco's support has almost always been seen as a troll pick. It's never really had any place in the meta or seen a lot of recognition at all. That, however, is not the case anymore after the changes he received in patch 9.20. Shaco's support is performing well above average in this patch, and some might even say it's stronger than Jungle Shaco at the moment. So in this video, we're going to be going over what makes AP Shaco support strong now, the setup you should be running on it, and how you should be looking to play it throughout the game. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So to start things off here, why is it strong now? Number one is that his boxes are now AoE, so this just allows him to be a little bit more effective, especially in the mid to late game with his boxes. If you put your boxes down to just block off choke points, block off areas towards objectives, then if the whole enemy team ends up walking into one of your boxes, the damage output is going to be much better with your boxes in 9.20 than it would be in previous patches. It's also going to help you out with your early game skirmishing potential, and when your jungler's coming to gank for you in the laning phase, if you get your boxes off and you get the AoE damage on both the enemy bot laners, it can just help you pick up that extra kill that maybe you wouldn't have been able to in previous patches. So a pretty nice change overall to Shaco's support. So number two is that his E's base damage got increased by 15 at all ranks, and it's also going to deal more damage now when the enemy is walking away from you. So this just adds to Shaco's support's poke damage in the laning phase, and it does make his laning phase a lot more viable than it was before. You're going to be running the Comet on this Shaco support. You're also going to run the Scorch, so that combined with the extra E damage actually allows you to deal some substantial poke in the laning phase, and it actually does make his laning phase pretty good now. Another great change in this patch is that his E is now magic damage instead of physical, so that's really good for support Shaco, because down in the bot lane, most bot laners are going to be running armor instead of magic resist in their runes, so this just allows them to deal a little bit more damage with that E now in the laning phase. In previous patches, his E was physical, so you wouldn't be doing as much because the enemy would be running those armor runes. His ultimate got a great change in this patch too, to where the boxes from his ult are now going to trigger as soon as his clone dies, so this just allows your ultimate to be really impactful in a team fight, especially for support Shaco, because if you can get the enemy team to focus your clone in a fight, they can kill that. And if your clone is like grouped up on multiple members of the enemy team and you just get an instant fear off and you get the instant AoE damage coming out from your boxes there, then it can just add for a lot more utility in fights and a lot more damage potential with the Shaco support. Now, not only did his E's base damage get increased, and it's also going to deal more damage when the enemy is walking away from you, it is also now a better execute in this patch. So in previous patches, it was still a pretty good execute, but when the enemies are below 30% HP now, it's going to deal 50% more damage in this patch, which is a much better execute than it was in previous patches. So it just allows for the support Shaco to swoop in, pick up kills when the enemies are low on HP, and it also does add for his all-in potential in the laning phase as well. If you get the enemies poked out very low, if you get them below 30% HP, it just makes it very easy for him to jump in with his Q, pop his ignite on the opponent, use E, and you can just burst the enemy out and they won't even be expecting it a lot of the time. A change back in 9.9 really helped out support Shaco as well. If you remember before, his boxes would just get immediately disabled if the enemy walked into them with a red trinket active, but now the enemies at least have to auto attack if they do see the box with the red trinket, so it doesn't just become completely useless if the enemy team does end up having a red trinket active. So once you do reach the mid to late game, support Shaco does have very strong objective control. If you get your boxes down before a team fight starts, if you can cut off choke points with your boxes and the enemy ends up walking through, then you're going to be able to deal a lot of damage. You're also going to fear the opponents and potentially get some really good picks for your team. If your team can just be playing around your boxes, notice where they're set up on the map. If you can ping those out for your team and tell them to play around it, then it can just be a really easy way for your team to get some really good picks in the mid game and just start snowballing even harder. The pick does have some pretty good all-in potential at level 3. Prior to level 3, you kind of just want to be poking with your E, trying to get the enemies to run into your W, but once you do hit the level 3, if you've poked the enemy out a little bit, especially if you poke them to like below 30% HP, then you can just look to straight up go for an all-in. You can jump in with your Q, ignite them, exhaust them if you're running that setup on Shaco, and you're going to deal a ton of damage. The enemy is going to deal none if you end up exhausting them, so you're all in very, very potent, and it's something that the enemy is just not going to expect a lot of the time. You couldn't really ask for a better meta down in the support role either right now for Shaco support to thrive in. We're seeing a lot of heavy engaged supports being played. Things like Knot, Pyke, Leona, Blitzcrank, Thresh. Shaco's super good into these picks because what you can do in the laning phase with your boxes is you can just always have a box sitting on top of your AD carry so that if the enemy support does try to engage, he just gets feared right away. He's not going to be able to follow up with really any damage or any extra CC abilities, and it just allows you to very easily disengage off of these heavy engaged support champions. Playing versus a melee support is also much better for Shaco support because it allows him to much more freely move up and look for E-poke in the laning phase. He doesn't really have to worry about getting poked out by a ranged support if he does move up and he does play more aggressive. So melee supports are just really good matchups for Shaco at the moment. Now for the setup you should be running on Shaco support, let's break this down here. So for the build on him, you're going to want to run the same build almost every single game. So the GLP as your rush item into the Leandries, that's going to be your core build, and those are the items that you're going to pick up pretty much every single game on the Shaco support. So your build for the most part is going to be pretty linear. For the ability maxing on the Shaco support, I would look to switch it up depending on your matchup or depending on your support matchup. So if you're going up against a melee support in the laning phase, W max first is going to be a lot more effective a lot of the time, just because the melee support is going to be looking to engage on you in the laning phase. If you have the extra fear duration there from your W, it's going to allow you to peel those champions off your AD carry much easier in lane. And if you're up against a ranged matchup, ranged supports are going to be looking to like jump on top of your AD carry. They're going to be sitting back poking you from a range, so your W just isn't going to activate as much in the laning phase. You're not going to get as much use out of a W max in ranged matchups. So I would be just looking to max your E out first in range matchups, so it does increase your poke potential in the laning phase. Moving down to the rune setup there, it's going to be Comet as your keystone pretty much every game. I just don't think there's anything better right now on Shaco support. For the rest of your runes, running the Absolute Focus, running the Scorch there, just allows for your E to deal that much more poke damage in the laning phase. And then for your secondary runes, running the Cosmic Insight and running the Biscuits, that's a pretty standard secondary page on most supports in the game at the moment. And then for your summoner spells on the pick, I would say it does come down to personal preference a little bit more for this one. The Flash Ignite there is what most people are running, and it does have the best win rate as well on Shaco support. So if you want, you could just stay very standard and just run that every single game on your Shaco support. If you want to be a little bit more strategic though, against melee matchups, running the Exhaust and running the Ignite is going to allow you to do very well. It's just going to prevent the enemies from really having any chance at all-inning you in the laning phase. If you're going up against like a Nautilus, or you're going up against a Thresh and they get a hook on you, putting that exhaust down on the enemy AD carry is just going to really limit their all-in, and it's just going to increase your all-in potential as well. If you can jump on the enemy AD carry after poking him out in the laning phase, throw an ignite and an exhaust down on them, they're going to deal no damage, you're going to deal a ton of damage to them. So it's overall just increases your laning potential with the pick. And then for the heal ignite, I would say it is better against range support, so you're not going to be able to use exhaust as effectively against range supports in the laning phase. So just running the heal there, I would say is going to be more consistent for you a lot of the time than running the exhaust. Now for how you should be looking to play the pick at level 1, just be proactive. Chances are the enemy team is not really going to like face check into your boxes. They're not going to walk into a bush and just take a ton of damage from your boxes, but it never hurts to try, right? If you're on red side, then you can look to cheese the tri-bush there. You can walk into the tri-bush, plant a couple boxes down. If they walk through, it's a free kill. If they don't, then you just go to lane. So look to be proactive with your level 1. If the enemies don't really expect the pick, or they're just not paying attention to the pick at all, you can look to get some pretty cheesy kills at level 1. Now prior to level 3, you kind of just want to be poking with your E for the most part. You can't really do anything more than that. You can try to cheese some boxes in the bushes, but the enemy is probably not going to walk in there most of the time. So just be looking to poke with your E. When you do hit the level 3, if you have poked the enemy out to a decent amount, then especially if you are playing with a strong all-in AD carry, if you're playing with somebody like a Tristana or a Lucian or a Caitlyn, then you can look to play very aggressive at level 3. So make sure they are on the same page as you. Make sure you're pinging them to go in, because you can just look to jump in with the pick, exhaust the enemy AD carry, throw the ignite down, get the execute damage off with your E there, and you can have a surprising amount of damage at level 3. Now, in order for you to succeed to the fullest potential with this pick, you do need to have very good objective control. So make sure you're arriving to objectives a little bit earlier, plant your boxes down, cut off choke points. If you can do this, if you can cut off all the areas to where the enemy is going to be looking to enter into the objective, then it just allows you to find some really good picks there before before the objectives even spawn. If the enemy jungler just walks into a box alone and your whole team is there ready to just pick them off when your box does trigger, it's just going to allow you to get a lot of free objectives, and it's going to allow you to snowball into other objectives. You get that pick on the enemy jungler, you get the dragon, you get the baron, and then you just end the game right after that. Now, a lot of the time, how you want to be using your ultimate with support Shaco is going to be a little bit different than with jungle Shaco or than with full assassin Shaco. You want to be using your ultimate a lot of the time before a fight starts or as a fight starts, and not so much to like dodge out on abilities, or not so much to just save yourself from dying when the enemy team engages onto you. If you can use your ultimate as a team fight is starting and the enemy team is just all grouped up, they end up killing your ultimate, and that can proc, and then they can get a super good fear off on the opponents, get a lot of AoE damage coming out, then that can be very impactful in team fights. So just try to be using your ultimate more proactively instead of reactively. So that is going to be it, guys. That is all for the video. So hopefully you do have a pretty good idea as to why Shaco support is now a pretty strong pick in this patch, why he's gotten stronger, the setup you should be using on the pick, and how you should be looking to play it. So if you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you in my next video.